Well, there we go. That's the views from two of those who've been involved. Let's talk now about some of the broader issues. Joining me at Westminster is Eric Pickles, Secretary of State for Communities and Local Government, who, as I mentioned earlier, is talking about this subject today. And Pavan Dhaliwal is from the British Humanist Association. Welcome to you both. Pavan, first of all, what's your reaction to this case? In a sense, it seems to be that there's a balance of rights and that there is no absolute on one side or the other. Do you welcome that?
Well, yes, we're very pleased with the result today. It shows that there is scope in our society for reasonable accommodation of religious practices as long as they don't infringe on the rights of others. And actually, these particular cases weren't so much about religion as about breaches of employment codes of practice. And I think that's important to actually remember that. They were dismissed in our domestic courts, and rightly so.
But, for example, in the case of the BA, even BA says it's changed its guidance now. So, in a sense, that seems to be an admission that probably they'd got the balance wrong under their old code of practice.
Well,
do you think that's right?
Well, at the time, it was against their uniform policy to be wearing jewellery. And it was only actually a few months later that they changed their uniform policy to allow the wearing of the necklace, and so therefore she could wear a necklace with a cross on it. But with the other cases, what is quite disappointing is that it hasn't been so widely reported in the media, the actual facts of the case, and there's been this sort of victim narrative of Christian persecution has been whipped up around it, which is actually quite false. So, for instance, with the nurse, she was given the option to wear the cross on a lanyard or to pin it to her uniform, and she refused to do so. And it was actually for her benefit to do that, because having the necklace was saying it would have been for her protection in case a disorientated patient tried to grab at it.
Eric Pickles, do you think that perhaps sometimes in the way this subject has been debated, that Christians have given the impression that they feel that they are being victimised as compared to people of other faiths, or indeed those of no faith?
Well, there has been a degree of kind of aggressive secularism. We saw it earlier last year when there was an attempt to stop prayers taking place in councils. But I mean, I welcome the decisions taken today. We'll look at the judgment really carefully, and if we do need to change the law to ensure that people can wear discreet religious symbols, we'll do so.
But the other three cases were lost. For example, in the case of the registrar who didn't want to conduct same-sex marriages, we heard from Gary McFarlane who didn't want to give sex therapy to same-sex couples. And, of course, we had the case of the nurse. But on those first two cases, I mean, are you disappointed by that?
No. I think if you're a public servant, or if you're offering a service to the public, then the public have a right to expect that that service will be available to all people. I am just about old enough to remember seeing in Bradford signs in windows that says no black people, also no black people can apply. That was a dreadful place to be, and I'm pleased that the law was changed in the early 1960s to change all that. People who go into a registrar's, people who are going for should not have to face the indignity of it being refused.
Pavan, where do you think this leaves us now? Do you think there is enough clarity as to what expressions of belief are acceptable in the workplace?
I think that there always was enough clarity. I think that where employers can, they will make reasonable accommodation, and where there are clear possibilities of infringing health and safety regulations, then they will go back to the contractual arrangements that people have previously signed up to. And in these instances, these four Christians had previously signed up to.
Of course, the question is, were they signing up freely and in a sense, fully informed about what implications would be for their faith? Or did they feel that, in a sense, they were under pressure because their jobs might depend on it?
Well, again, you would then have to look at the profession that you're in. If it comes to the case that if you actively want to try to discriminate against another person because you believe that your right to your religion outrides the right to other people.
Eric Pickles, in the end, this is all about the balance of rights. I mean, there's been a lot of criticism of the European Convention on Human Rights and therefore of the judgments that are made by this court. And indeed, a lot of people in your party would rather like Britain to walk away from the European Convention. mentioned, come up with its own version. That's something the government's been looking at. Do you think when you look at these kinds of judgments that actually they are kind of a reasonable balance, an objective assessment of the case, or do you feel that in some ways Britain is being hard done by under this particular structure?
I've got an opportunity of doing a line-by-line scrutiny of of these judgments.
Sure, and they're very long.
yes, I've at least seen the length of them. I do think, from my party's point of view, that it would be good, as we suggested at the last election, to go for a British Bill of Rights. But I do think that our country was built on freedom of expression, freedom of religious tolerance. This country's had experience of what happens when those two things are breached, but it's also built on ensuring that where you're offering a public service, that's delivered freely and in a non-discriminatory way.
Ironic, though, isn't it, that certainly in the case of the BA case, she lost in the British courts, but then wins in the European court.
Well, I dare say the decision of BA to change may have had maybe a psychological effect. What BA did originally was wrong. I don't think we should object to see a crucifix or to see a Jewish star or other religious symbolisms. I think being of faith is what makes people tick.
Eric Pickles, Pavan Dhaliwal, who's from the British Humanist Association, thank you both very much.